Oopsie. 1 second.
At least it is true. At least it is true.
Hello, my friends. Welcome. Welcome to another episode, another get together of the Salt Circle. Um, you know, I'm Daniela. I'm your host. Hello, welcome. Um, sorry. If it's your first time here, please don't be shy. Don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of anything you might want to ask or anything that you're experiencing or feeling. This is a safe place where we can find mutual support going through taboo times, but we don't have to keep quiet about it, such as, navigating other people's alcoholism, being no contact with family members, or going through our own healing or grieving journeys. So, please welcome. If this is not your first time, then welcome back, my friends. I'm really happy to have you here. I'm really excited that, we can continue to share each other's, triumphs and our defeats and provide mutual support and validation. So, feel free to subscribe, comment, share this with anyone who might be going through something similar and who could benefit. Um, every Wednesdays we get together and discuss specifically death, dying, and bereavement within the already complex scope of healing, grieving, handling dysfunctional family dynamics, other people's addictions, whatever the case may be. So, sorry if I seem a little out of it. I've been, really thinking about what to talk about this specific, Wednesday, this death, dying, and bereavement day, because, doing shadow work, which is the premise of this entire channel and this entire support group, it's, a place where we can do shadow work or at least open ourselves up to self reflection through the lens of psychology and paganism. And I was thinking, how best could I utilize this, hour that I try to separate, twice a week just specifically to do shadow work, just specifically to get to know myself and work on certain things that I've noticed are lingering after, surviving my childhood, I guess. I don't know. It's weird for me to talk about, but it's good to talk about. So if you can relate, this is a perfect place for you. So this Wednesday, this death, dying, and bereavement day, um, I guess it's going to be a lot more personal, even though these videos are pretty personal for me anyway. But I really wanted to share some authentic and personal insight into what happens when someone gets a terminal diagnosis, or what does that end of life process, what could it look like if you haven't gone through it yet or you're anticipating going through it. um if you are going through it, this is something that we all will deal with at one point or another, and ultimately we will face our own mortality. So I think it's really important to talk about. If you have gone through it, I'm here for you. It's rough. Man, that shit's rough. Shit aged me. I'm sorry. I wish there was more support, at least when I was going through what I, experienced. So I think that was one of the driving forces for this channel, for the Salt Circle and this entire project. So, really to do the most I can with this hour, I thought, yeah, let me just explain what happened with my grandparents and, like, just my story. And then also, through the scope of like a really dysfunctional family with a lot of generational trauma and unresolved mental issues. I don't know how to put it lightly. And it's complicated. I think if you have relatives that are, older and are immigrants, um, they might react solely based on preserving the family. And I think the newer generation, like I guess technically first gen, at least for I don't know, we'll get into it. But the perverse theme that my grandparents would not ever let my father face the consequences. Um it made the grieving process a lot harder, and it made the caretaking process of their end of life way more complicated. Um, and that has given me such survivor's guilt, you know. So I'm gonna try not to lose my train of thought. If I do, I apologize. Definitely please comment if you feel compelled to. So what to really expect when someone receives, a terminal diagnosis, or, what can happen? What does that look like? So the first time there was a diagnosis, I heard that, my aunts, so it was my grandparents, my father's parents, my grandparents, who also basically were like my parents, because my father was a drug addict, invalid, deadbeat, whatever. So my grandparents functionally were like parents for me, and that's not really saying much. Whatever. So their daughter, my father's sister, who has a very also complex relationship due to my grandparents' dynamic with their son, the lifelong drug addict, con artist, in and out of prison, just horrible, horrible person. And she took my grandfather, this was, I don't know how many years ago, 28, 2016, 2017, maybe. She took my grandfather to an appointment at the hospital to see, what's happening with his lungs, like what's going on. And they basically said, this is COPD and it's end stage. This will kill him in a matter of, X amount of months. And my aunt said that, the doctor who reviewed the testing and the scans or whatever the fuck that they did, there was no bedside manner. He just kind of came in and was just like, hey, so has anyone gone over the results with you? And my aunt's like, no, like we've been waiting here. And, in front of my grandfather and my aunt, he just laid it out as clinically as possible, and then went about his day. Like, was like, hey, so do you have any questions? And, stunned because aunt my aunt has a very complex relationship with her father, who she was no contact with for like 20 years. And then she's taking him to doctor's appointments, and all of a sudden you get this, pretty severe diagnosis. So I can only imagine what her positionality of this was like, And that's the generational shit, right? It gets better. It gets so much better, let me tell you. Um, and I remember grandpa apparently didn't care, and he was like, oh, all right, like, let's just go home. Almost like he was, like, ah, that okay. He was whatever about it. And my aunt told me, later that night she was crying. She was, because she came to the house, my grandparents' house, where they were and where I also was. And she was crying, and she was like, yeah, like I just there was no emotional support when giving that diagnosis. And since that, my experience is that a lot of good doctors will provide emotional support. The doctor at this particular hospital in New York was just shitty, but that is something to be aware of. At any point, any test can pin some type of end stage disease or sickness. Um, I had a friend that, she told me in college that her mom went to the doctor and was told, like, you know, call your children, you're dying now, basically. And that was just it. So health, I think when you're a healthcare professional and you see mortality so frequently, you forget that other people might not, like my aunt. Um, and maybe grandpa was more desensitized because he did see some of his siblings die, in the 40s and 50s, and Hell's Kitchen after, escaping jail or getting into a bar fight or getting tuberculosis or just dying in the living room. So maybe grandpa, and I think maybe too, grandpa was just ready for it to be over in some way. He just wanted to wipe his hands off the mess that was the remainders of the remnants of the family, whatever that used to be. So, and remember, that was like in 2017, 2016 that this diagnosis came about and was like, yes, you have a couple of months to live, get your affairs in order, was, the term that they used. And grandpa lived until last year, 2023. Yeah, 2023. So, doctors I've heard many a time want to be wrong about these diagnoses or these severe outcomes or bad prognoses. Sorry if I'm butchering these words, but they're just going off of clinical data. COPD ultimately was the thing that destroyed my grandfather's body and it led to his death. It's a degenerative disease and it's hard to watch someone die. It is, and to see that decline, to see their body betray them. First, in small increments that are almost unnoticeable, and then after a couple of years, and you really compare them to maybe a picture that you've seen, or you take a couple of steps back and you see how frail they are, and it's just sad that they can't walk, they can't do anything that they've loved, they can't travel, they can't even yell if they needed to. If they fell over, they're fucked. And it's really brutal coming to that. I was just saying earlier today, because I have a bunch of dogs and they're all old for the most part except for one. It's really sad when a dog gets old and you see the decline. You see that slow decay while they're still alive. Um, there's almost a guilt that comes from that. And I don't know if that's because I too am codependent. I am. I'm sorry. I'm trying to recover from it, but damn it, that shit's ingrained into this nervous system. Like, ooh, but you want to fix it, you want to heal, you want to take care of that person, especially when that's all you've ever been good for is to take care of others and sacrifice for others, or not, you know, that your happiness is dependent on others' well being. So when my grandfather, to see that decline over all of those years, and then to also have the dysfunction of my dad's drug abuse and his, just fuckery. He would just decide, he would get a call in the middle of the night from some prostitute, some friend who is, 40, 50 years old, and she just walks the street of Poughkeepsie and she's on drugs and she's freaking out. And my dad, who's just been doing drugs in his room all fucking day because he has nothing else to do and that's all he ever does, gets an idea, even though he has no driver's license. He hasn't had one in like 30 years. He just takes my grandfather's car and just drives off into the night, crashes it immediately, and then walks back to the house. There is snow, there's fresh snow because this is in the middle of December. The police come, they knock on the door, and they're just like, what the fuck happened? And I'm like, excuse me? Like, I don't know what the fuck this is. And very calmly, they're saying, there's a car that belongs here, that we ran all the information and you see the tracks, like it literally down the block, you see like just smashed into a telephone fucking pole. And, the keys are in the ignition. It's obviously not broken into, and there's like footsteps coming right back here. Like, what happened? And then my grandparents would just not acknowledge that my father did anything. They're just like, well, what do we know? We don't know anything. We haven't seen anything. And so the auto insurance has been insane for them their entire lives. Truly, truly, because auto insurance doesn't care after a while. Your rates will just be a million fucking dollars, when you get into accidents that frequently. No police report, no investigation, no outcome of it, just, excuse me, what happened? So to have shit like that my dad would pull, or he would bring people, just random men from truck stops. He just bring them over and be like, "That's my friend. You saying my friend can't stay here?" And it's like, this is literally a hobo that you found, and you're just doing drugs within the basement. Like, I'm not comfortable with him being here because I'm a female and none of these doors lock because this is an old farmhouse and I don't want to die. And my grandparents just look at me and be like, "Well, you can leave. That's your father's friend." Yeah, yeah, we don't know him. We've never seen him. Your father relies on us for rides and money and everything. But yeah, well, of course, obviously, this guy. How can we not take your father's word for it? It was commonplace that visitors couldn't come over because their wallets would get stolen, or their coats would go missing, or their shoes, or literally their car would get taken out of the fucking driveway. And even the hospice nurses, after a while, were like, "We can't keep coming here. Like, your father is abusive towards us and he's smoking cigarettes in front of the oxygen tanks." And my grandparents still, to the very end, would just be like, "Leave my son alone." And that dysfunction, I don't even know how to interpret it from an authentic place. I can talk about it like, "Oh, from an enlightened place." Whatever, no. It was absolute insanity trying to take care of my grandparents, and for my grandfather's illness to take like the almost a decade, I loved my grandfather very much. And I would have done anything. I would have given him years off my life, but the dysfunction was so, it was literally like you were in the fucking La La Land. You were in, hellish wonderland and nothing made sense. It was just, it was like my father was a fleshy poltergeist just fucking with the mortal realm, and like, oh my gosh. And then randomly, years later, in like 2021, right before, you know, it was like either right before COVID or in the meat of COVID, I forget. But I get a call from my Aunt Donna once again. And she asks me to come to the house, and I'm a half hour away, and I say, "Sure." She's like, "Grandma doesn't feel well." In Grandma's 80 fucking years, she's never ever admitted that she didn't feel well. Something is fucking wrong. So I went there. Everything's always complex, and you immediately get to the property, and it's like you go through this aura of ammonia and miasma. It's just this noxious dysfunction that's in the air. It's like the entire atmosphere of this property is just cursed. It really, as soon as you get there, it permeates you in such a negative way. And I think just, a part of that was probably my nervous system just getting on guard, especially once you leave that kind of dysfunction to come, willingly back to it. So I look at grandma, I come into the house, I look at grandma, grandpa's still on his oxygen. This house reeks of cigarettes because nobody, dad just, he's a giant fucking spoiled fucking baby. Just horrible, man. And grandma, she looked so small. She was sitting in her little grandma chair in her bedroom, and she had her grandma moo her robe, her other robe, and a blanket. And she was just sitting here in her chair. She didn't have her teeth and no makeup. She wasn't done up like she's always fucking done. You know how Italian grandmas are. And she just said she's just like, "It hurts a lot. It feels very swollen, my throat and my tongue." And I was like, "You need to go to the doctor." So the next morning, we took her to the doctor, and he's like, should really bring you to the hospital to do some more tests. And it turned out that grandma had a type of lung cancer called squamous cell carcinoma in her lungs, in both lungs. And it took over, almost 100%. It was just her lungs were just cancer. And that's what's causing this inflammation because it's literally spreading up your windpipe and up your throat and into your mouth. And I'm so sorry, but you have 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to live. And we can set you up with hospice. We can put you into, whatever hospice center, but there is no curing this. So there's not going to be, um, any chemotherapy or any treatment unless, you know, you want to pay for it out of pocket, basically. So grandma's just like, okay, I would like to go home. I want to die at home, just like my sisters did, just like, her mom did. That's what she just wanted to be home where she created a nest for the last however long, despite the dysfunction and the chaos. That's where she wanted to be. And, from what I've heard, my cousin, my aunt's son offered to, whatever you want, I'll pay for. Anywhere you want to go, anything you want to live here, you want to live there, whatever you want, I'll pay for it. And my grandma's like, nope, I just want to be home by my son and my husband with all my stuff. And okay. So grandma just lived with her son and her husband, who were both obsessed with each other and disgustingly codependent and narcissistic, hyper attachment. I can't even explain the unhealthy dynamic that went on between my grandfather and my dad. So no one would have been able to take care of grandma. She literally was in a hospital. She came home in an ambulette, like a little ambulance, and they set up her little deathbed, her little hospital wheelie bed that you can get just delivered to your house, which is pretty handy. And they set you up with a mattress and a couple of rubber sheets and some hospital grade wipes and just almost like hotel toiletries, but like from a Stephen King hotel, you know what I mean? Like it's surreal that these little goodie bags of end of life come with these diagnoses from a good hospital, right? When it's more imminent. Um, I guess it really was that bad. And grandma was just coping until she could not anymore. And that hurts me that she was taking care of her husband and son so hard that, that she literally worked as the devoted housewife until she died. And so when grandma came home, we were assigned hospice nurses who my father made very difficult for them to come to the house, and they only came a couple of times. But, when someone goes into end of life care, there are a lot of resources that are available. So whatever your religion is, they can really fulfill your spiritual needs. They will make sure that you have medication brought to you and administered. Separate nurses will come there specifically to help bathe and take care of the house. But it's very, very few hours. It maybe culminates to 5 hours a week. So that's really not enough to provide round the clock care. Um, like I said, my father and my grandfather, grandma and grandpa were from old school New York, second wave immigration. kind of values. So grandpa didn't cook for himself, grandpa didn't clean, he didn't do laundry. Grandpa worked and ate, and that's he drank wine, that's what grandpa did. And grandma did everything else. So everything just stopped for the house. And, you know, especially with grandpa's diagnosis, for him being sick too, I think a lot of people looking in thought that my father would finally snap out of his drug addiction, his bullshit. And it didn't happen. If anything, it just got more unbearable because he was such dead weight. He was also just a dead person. Grandma's dying in the living room, and grandpa has an oxygen and can't breathe, can't walk. He's has to take a seat every 10 steps, and he's driving my dad to meet someone in Poughkeepsie, literally to go get drugs. And they won't look at the situation in the face. They're way beyond the point of shadow work, you know? I do, just like I think how addiction has a point of no return, I think enabling has a point of no return. And my grandparents were way past that. So much so that, oh, so my aunt was just did not want to just live there in that. She was, living from out of state, trying to do the best she could to visit her parents, who she had a very strange relationship with, and her brother, who still lived in that house, who's just being spoiled and pampered. It was hard for her. Um, so I actually offered to just move in. And I told my boyfriend at the time what happened. And I was like, I would, appreciate your support, but I'm gonna move in with my grandma and just take care of her for the next 2 weeks. And he was not supportive at all. So watch out for those fuckers. You think, how can someone not be supportive? But I think because death and dying, and then doing that in a very dysfunctional situation is more than a lot of people can handle. And you should not feel bad about that and feel ashamed that this is your experience. Some people really just aren't equipped to, support someone who's going through like a hard level boss fight. You know what I mean? Um, So, again, grandpa's just taking care of my dad in such an unhealthy way. And grandma is in the living room because grandpa actually said to me and my aunt one day that he didn't want to see grandma in the bedroom, like, because he had to sleep there and he just didn't want to see her, like, and her stuff. So, like, to get her stuff also out of the bedroom. He said that within earshot of grandma, and I couldn't reconcile like how 60 or 70 years of marriage culminates into that, dysfunction or not. Like you've both been in this, what I think that is, if anything, it's just a testament to how out of sync grandpa was with his own feelings. His wife dying elicit an emotion that made him uncomfortable, so he just tried to push it out of his visual field. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And yeah, so grandma's just in the living room, and every chance I leave grandma's end of life medicine, like her painkillers, because lung cancer is really painful, I've come to find. Um, But grandma didn't want to take any drugs because she was so afraid she was going to become a drug addict. And I tried to tell her in the nicest way. I was like, Grandma, I think you're beyond that point. Like, I don't think you have to worry about that. And she just looked at me and she's like, I still don't want it. And I'm like, Grandma, please, I can't watch this. It's very painful to watch someone die, but to do so when your son will take these pills and be nodding out in the kitchen on the floor basically, and I can't. It's already so fucked up, Grandma. You need to take these. And also the hospice nurses, the medication dispensing nurses, when they come twice a week, they take very meticulous calculations and measurements, and they count everything to see what's being taken, what's not. And if nothing's being taken, you're not going to have anything if you really need it, because, so especially because it's just going to keep progressing until it doesn't anymore. It's not going to just plateau, you know what I mean? So I really wanted to just have her to have the ability to take pain relief instead of just getting it removed altogether, especially because every moment I would leave her pill boxes, like we kept everything in a little safe deposit box. It wasn't safe. There was no lock. It was just a glorified toolbox. Her medicine would go missing. And the nurses would just look at me and be like, we can't have this. And I would say, I was like, you don't know what I'm up against. And this one nurse, Nicole, I'll never forget her. She understood 100%. She's like, I've seen this so many times. She's like, I validate what you're going through. I see what your dad is. I understand, but I have to be real with you. They will cut off your services and we won't be allowed to come here anymore. And that's the truth of, end of life care. There's a lot of services available, but when you throw in shit like someone else's addiction, their habitual lying, their stealing, they're shielded by anyone who would, uphold any kind of consequence. It's just, it becomes almost enough to make you lose your fucking mind. And the grief process is brutal as it is, and to make that even more brutal, man, oh man. So I remember grandpa also, and this is a thing that's interesting when someone gets terminal. People come out of nowhere and they start telling you deep dark secrets, things that they haven't told anyone. The things that my grandfather told me about, problems with grandma, I just couldn't believe, and that it was also commonplace to have these views and attitudes and things done to women, back in that time period when they weren't behaving a certain way. And feeling terrible that almost like grandma was trapped in this dynamic and she just tried to make the best of it, and all this Christian Catholic guilt or whatever. And that grandpa was almost using me as a confessional, you know, that he forced grandma to undergo procedures at, psychiatric hospitals after her kids were born. And that, he would force, grandma to take care of his mom when his mom had dementia and like became really combative and would jump out of windows and things like that. Lots of stories. I'll get into it one day when I have enough cohesive thoughts to really dive into that brain fold. But it's strange that time when someone is dying. I think it's important to have people know and view that person and come share stories and support. It was so hidden when grandma was actively dying. And even though the doctor said, 2 weeks, it actually took closer to 6 weeks. A couple of times, grandpa would say like, oh, she's gonna beat this, look, she's getting better, she's eating. And that spurt of revitalization, that's kind of a normal thing when someone's dying, to have gusts or these waves of energy and appetite and lucidity. It's almost like the body's trying to kickstart itself again. It's just really trying to use all of its energy that it can to maintain what it used to. Um, and towards the end too, grandma was seeing people crawling out of her little hospital wheelie bed. She was seeing, dogs that she raised as a child running outside in the yard because she was looking out the picture window, and she saw a bunch of relatives just hanging out in the living room because it was a pretty big living room. And, my dad likes to say that her sister was there because something that the sister gifted grandma many, 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 many years ago before I was born flew across the room and broke. And I don't care what my dad says. I hate him. And it's not that I don't believe in ghosts. I'm sure even if that did happen, just because my dad says it, I just immediately, I don't fucking care. But the, the the hallucinations, we can call it, that someone who is actively dying sees is a very interesting experience. And to share in that with someone, I think, and that's how I got into wanting to be a death doula. I think the dying process is a process, and to have someone go through that process with you, especially while shit is absolutely out of pocket and creepy as fuck and completely new territory. I think that's a divine way to show love and to show, human connection. And I'm grateful that I was able to do that with my grandmother, even though a lot of the memories that I do have with her were very fucking dysfunctional and insane and tainted with bullshit from my dad. So, and also don't be afraid to Google things like how to pick someone up from a bed. Like there are tools. TikTok Marketplace has a lot of good palliative care tools, like for getting people up and, to help you wash them. And please, if you need help finding these things, message me. I will help you. You don't even have to worry about it. Um, and that was hard. I remember one time, the first time I tried washing grandma and seeing her naked body and just all the scars that grandpa talked about from all the procedures that he had her undergo. I felt so sick to the depths of my heart. Poor just grandma. She was a product of the dysfunction for the 50 years before I was alive. And then she was a part of the dysfunction and created it for the next 30 years. And I felt so, my heart really just broke for her. I was just like, you never stood a fucking chance, did you, grandma? And it was almost like she looked so small too. And, around this time, right beforehand, I called a cousin, and I was just out of my fucking mind. I was like, I can't do this alone. I am completely alone. My boyfriend doesn't even help me. He doesn't even want to visit me, even in the middle of the night because he's afraid of my dad. He knows what happens. Like I have no support. I have no friends. Like nobody cares about this and what I'm going through. Hospice nurses are even afraid to come here, right? And she, I think, called her mom, my aunt, and told her, what for. And that kind of kicked my aunt in the ass to come and help me out. And she took over because I remember I was trying to wash grandma, and my aunt comes in, from her 3-hour drive, and she's like, here, give her to me. And grandma's naked, just like trying to like hold on to me, and I'm trying to like fucking get her back and stuff. Cause like when you're using the bathroom, like you have to clean them, you know? She would do it for you. Grandma would do it for you. She'd let your father molest you, but she would clean you up when you're a little kid and you shit yourself. It's about, again, it's insanity. Grandma was fucking unwell, and she was a product from generations of unwellness and dysfunction because grandma was the product of an alcoholic, and a prostitute from fucking Poland. And they came here and, you know, she was one of 12. I can't even imagine. I've only heard a couple of stories of the shit that grandma went through. And I just remember giving grandma to my aunt and like taking a few steps back and just, soap and water and shit just like on me. And I felt, and my aunt's like, go, go, I got it, I got it. And I was just frazzled from the weeks of trying to take care of grandma despite the dysfunction. And I just left. And then a couple of days later, grandma died and I wasn't there. Um, and I also like broke up with my boyfriend too. I was just like, I can't live with you anymore after you just didn't support me at all emotionally while I'm going through this. So I got that call like during this like blow up fight with my boyfriend and got the call that grandma died and your father's freaking out, the police have to come. I don't know what to do. I just want to let you know. Okay, love you, bye. And that kind of just sealed the deal for me. I was like, yeah, I'm breaking up with this guy. I'm leaving. I don't know what to do with grandpa, but he can come with me. So I asked grandpa, I was like, hey, I'm here for you. Do you want to move in with me? We can get an apartment. Do you want to travel across country? I will rent an RV. Whatever you want to do. And grandpa's like, no, I want to stay near my son. I'm like, okay, fair enough. And I was asking, because when someone dies, things progress very quickly. Someone dies, you call 911 and they collect the body, they'll bring an ambulance over. You could also call, when you're in palliative or hospice care, the nurses will give you like this little like what to expect when someone dies kind of like informative pamphlet. And there's a number in there that you can call for like 24/7 help, like medical emergencies, like to a nurse hotline. And you can call these numbers and they'll bring someone to assist you with the dead and that transportation. The body will be transported to mortuary service where it'll either be cremated or set up for other types of burial. Um, you can view the body. You got like a day or two to do a funeral kind of thing. Um, the family shit is just so complex. Nobody even knew that grandma was dying. And I think Aunt Donna was just really upset. And I didn't realize that we didn't have time to discuss or think about it. And I honestly didn't think to ask right away. But grandma wanted to be like an organ donor. And grandpa refused her final wishes and she was just cremated really, really quickly. And there was no ceremony, there was no wake, there was no service, there wasn't even an obituary that was written. Nothing, nothing. Nobody even called me to be like, oh, sorry for your loss. Didn't get any kind of random strange cousin or relative, one of the 12 brothers or sisters that were still alive, any of their children. Nobody contacted me who they raised basically, because that's how fucked up the family was, right? And grandpa didn't even care. He had his son, right? So they were left alone for not even a year. Aunt Donna would try to go and visit and take care of things at that house, but it was turning into a disgusting pigsty because these two men who had grandma their whole lives to just take care of them were unable to keep the house. Completely unable. It was disgusting. My dad made it disgusting. I wasn't anywhere near there anymore. I left. I was um I was in Colorado at that point. So there was nothing I could do, and I felt very guilty about leaving. But Grandpa always said that he just wanted to be with his son. And I could not live in that house anymore. I could not be around my dad. I love my grandpa, but I couldn't go down that same path of ruthless codependency with my grandpa that my grandpa went down with my dad. I saw how it would continue, and I needed to save myself at the expense of my grandfather. And I really know deep down my grandpa couldn't have been saved. There's nothing that I could have done because this had been going on for decades before I was even alive, right? Grandpa had gone through shit in his childhood that have led him to this type of mentality and positionality that was far beyond anything that I could have influenced. Um, you know? So it turned into grandpa had to end up leaving the upstate house in New York and moved in with my aunt in Jersey. And I don't know how this incredible woman did it. I have no fucking idea, but my grandfather and my father moved in with her. And for a few months, she did everything she could to maintain the peace. But with Grandpa not being able to drive anymore, because the couple of times he would try to drive in Jersey to bring my dad into Manhattan or Hoboken to get drugs, my grandpa would get so confused and just crash. And he's so old and so frail and he can't fucking breathe. And my dad gets afraid of the cops, so he just runs out of the car every single time and just creates such a spectacle. Just leaves his father there. What, to die, I guess? How do we. So it would culminate into also a lot of arguing because, my dad is just disgusting and he steals things. And how do you live with that? How do you live with that? Aunt Donna was no contact from her parents for such a long time, and then to live in that again, almost like you were that a child again in that. I don't know how my dad did it. So she kicked my dad out. There was a restraining order, a whole bunch of police things, and it always has to get to that point before, because Grandpa would never do anything. He would never say anything about his poor son. Oh, my son's just sick. Oh, leave my son alone. Um, and then Grandpa didn't want to live without his son, so he ended up choosing to move back to the upstate house. And he lived with his son, and Aunt Donna would try to visit them as often as she could. And then it turned into, you know, and this is where it gets fucked up, and I'll get into it in a minute. But I get a call one day that, Grandpa died. And at this point, I'm in Missouri, right? I'm in fucking Missouri. And I get a call that Grandpa died, and I ask how. And I've known that Grandpa was living at the upstate house, and he was there with my dad. They were just, they were left there to, I guess, fend for themselves. And my dad ended up getting arrested and was in rehab or whatever at this time. And Aunt Donna was literally the only person who was going to the house. And she and my grandfather, I think, got into a fight, which led to no one going to the house for a couple of days. And from what we've, from what I personally have found out, he was discovered on the floor, face down, and it was like his heart gave out and just his body, it looked like he tried to get up and he just fell and he just died, right? So he leviticized, or he partially liquefied, and that doesn't happen really quickly, right? That's not a day type of deal. So That's what happened to Grandpa because I guess my aunt tried to call Grandpa and didn't answer his phone, so she calls the police. They performed a wellness check and they found him. And they came and they took him, and then he was same fashion as Grandma, just cremated really quickly, really quietly. No one knew, no obituary. And my father thought that he would then just inherit the house. Um, he would just have it along with all the cars because there was two cars at the time. So he ended up getting his cousin, his cousin, like another 50-year-old man who is deathly afraid of police, mind you. There's a huge story about that I can get into later. And he gets this cousin to bring him from like the Bronx or wherever he the fuck was in the city up to upstate to my grandparents' house to just take over. And my aunt is saying, I'm calling the cops. You can't, this isn't just your house. Like it has to go to probate. We have to sell this house because it's in the will, because your father wants you to get 50% of whatever this house sells for. Because that's how much grandpa loved his son. And we couldn't even contest it or anything. Not that it's worth to contest, but it took a bunch of police officers to get my dad off the property. He was having such an insane meltdown. He would refuse to leave the house. He was threatening to, blow it up with him in it and kill everyone, kill himself, everything. It's like, so he's just been in and out of rehab for what I can tell since then. Um, yeah, the house is in probate. It's getting sold. It's gone forever. And the last time I was there, I was doing a yard sale and I had to get the house ready for renters so the house wouldn't get foreclosed on. Because there was a time where it was like, oh, we'll just buy my dad out of his portion of the house and keep the house in the family. I tried everything, man. I really, really did. I thought about renting it myself until probate was over and until I could figure something else out. So at that time, I had to, um, and me and my aunt actually went to the house at this point. We ended up cleaning the giant blood and liquid stain that Grandpa left behind in the seafoam green shag carpet. We made a concoction with like Dawn dish soap and baking powder and fucking whatever else, bleach, scrubbing the shit with steel wool, frothing up this crimson bubbly goop. It smelled horrible, and it was in the middle of July too, during this ungodly heat wave and the mugginess of the fucking air and the humidity and the stench of this frothing clean death. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, that's all I have to say. Um, and then my aunt broke down as we were just scrubbing away. She just started crying her eyes out, and I felt so bad. And I just understood. I really understood the weight of everything that she went through. And I drinking wine all day since we landed. Tried my best to comfort her. I was like, I know, this is fucked up. It was really fucked up. Um, so that is a very brief outline of the dying process of my grandparents, what I went through at least. Um, then I wanted to talk a little bit about survivor's guilt, there is such a sense of it's not fair and I am a bastard for remaining, which is completely unfounded, right? I think maybe it's just part of my codependency. Maybe it's just wanting to rage against the natural order as a heathen. I don't know. I'm just bullshitting about that last night line, you know me. But it's almost like you leave someone behind in such an undignified way. And the culmination of the memories that you've shared, you wanted more from that. And it's almost like you feel like you've wasted time or you've wasted opportunities. And it's so unfair, especially in the scope of dysfunction and despair, because did you really have time? Did you really have opportunity to ask these questions, to get to know these people, to work through this fucked up scene? You know what I mean? I'm not meaning to rhyme, I swear. I just turn into Dr. Seuss sometimes. I remember right before Grandpa really took a before I left New York, that time when Grandpa, right before he died, I remember thinking like, you need to find out about Grandpa now. You need to hear these family stories before they're lost forever, because you don't know anyone else in the family. You have your aunt and her children, but that's honestly it. There are all these stories, all this depth to the family that would make sense of all this mischief and mayhem. The maladies would fucking be demystified with these stories, almost like an augmented reality, like closure is. I just need these final pieces. I need you to say this, validate this in a roundabout way with this. Um, and I would talk to my cousin, hey, we should start, asking grandpa stories and asking him to tell us things. But there was so much hurt and complexity with the relationship between me and grandpa, cousin and grandpa. It was so it never really happened. And so, yeah, now these stories are gone, and I feel a responsibility. And it's almost the same way as how I've chosen to be child free and not to have children. My bloodline ends with me. It seems almost like that is a definite, because the lore, the context, the family's history is also lost with me. I didn't get it. I didn't collect it. Um, and the house is lost too. I talked about that last week. That was a doozy. That was brutal. So it's just with loss, it almost feels like it was, really taken from you. You've missed it. You've misplaced it. You've misstepped. And then to remain afterwards, it almost feels like you shouldn't be. Like you're still in a competition with a technicality keeping you there, which I think is a really trivial defeatist attitude that I'm not trying to have. But man, it's okay. All of our feelings are valid, and that's always the case. But to go through grief is also to go through these feelings, and then to have to, I think, grieve that you're moving on without them, to grieve that they won't experience anything else and that they won't be known by anyone else. um but again, maybe that's just codependency. I feel especially that way for grandma. I don't know if it's like that whole female dynamic, but I wish I knew more. I do. Um, and then on the flip side, it's fucked up because I've been no contact with my mother for the majority of my life. And the same thing's gonna happen with me on that front, on that end too. The history, the lore, the everything is gonna be lost. Um, I don't know. It makes me feel weird existing, kind of. It's almost like I want to apologize to my ancestors. Hold on, I need to charge this, but maybe that is what I'll do. I do need to get a shrine figured out for my ritualistic needs. I haven't done that just yet. Mm, is it plugged in? Okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna check the comments and see if anyone said anything. Oh, cool. Yep. I agree. Mhm. Oh, look at these over here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for stopping in and, supporting. I really do appreciate it. I think this is a good stopping point. Um, Hi, Kitty. I think with survivor's guilt too, it's really important to allow yourself both parts of that term, survivor's guilt. Allow yourself to feel guilty, allow yourself to naturally feel these emotions and work through them, but also allow yourself to survive. Can't rot in bed. You can't ruminate to the point of, you know, going into an emotional mania. You have to survive. You have to, still take care of yourself. And I think that lessens the burden of that guilt is when you do take care of yourself and you do live with more intention, which can be hard though when you're going through grief. I know with my grief, grandpa has been dead for like a year, grandma's been dead for like 2 years. The grief comes in waves, and so does the guilt about everything that came with, their end of life, from me not physically being there and me physically helping them, to me not actually doing what they've done for their son and just shielding them from their own consequences. They died in the way that they wanted to die. They died in the same manner of the life that they carved out for themselves. And while I would have done anything to change that, I can at least survive knowing that I would have done anything I could have. The guilt will dissipate with that, just being kind to yourself. You don't have to make the grieving process harder on yourself. And it might even sound like really like, shallow to be like, oh yeah, like let me just like be nice to myself. Just trust me on this. Just say nice things to yourself while you work through these emotions and while you think about these memories and allow yourself to freely feel what you're going to feel and make it a safe place for you to feel these things and have these thoughts. Don't, I don't know. I really do appreciate you joining me and stopping in and talking with me, here at the Salt Circle. It's always a really nice time to share my experiences and see if anyone else can relate and benefit from what I've gone through. I really believe that it's important to talk to each other and to share in our experiences, especially in experiences that all of us are going to go through. Um, but yeah, tune in next week on Monday where we discuss another episode of shadow work and self sorcery. And then next Wednesday, we'll have another episode about death, dying, and bereavement. Um, I really enjoy when people comment. Please comment if you want me to talk about anything in particular, if you want me to discuss any themes or, dive into any questions you might have. Nothing is off limits. Please feel free to comment whatever you might be curious about or scared of or experiencing yourself, because you probably are also, voicing concerns that other people have too, that maybe they're too shy to, ask. So by you asking, you're doing, a great service by, perpetuating and spreading information that I think everyone should utilize and at least have access to. Um, but yeah, please be sure to subscribe and, like I said, share and like and all those things. Um, I am gonna put on some music and try to, ground myself. And if you've seen the other videos that I've shared, this is just kind of a beginning and ending ritual that I like to do where I'm just focusing on breathing and my muscles and where my body is in this setting. I really just focus on bringing myself down into my body, focusing inward and grounding myself. Breathing, listening to this music, and blowing out the candles as a way to really end this session of introspection and shadow work and, my grief journey. Um, so yeah, like I said, my name is Daniela. Thank you for watching. Okay, let me get the music going.
Is anyone still alive? Judo! Pippin! Carcass! I'm not even sure why I did it. It's pretty pathetic.
So am I. Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death. Is this a curse or some kind of punishment? I often think about the God who blessed us with this cryptic puzzle and wonder if we'll ever have the chance to kill him.
It is a double-edged sword. It can be a tool used for winning precious things as well as protecting them.
precious things, like friendship and love.
For some men, these are the most precious. But I believe that beneath them, there is something even more precious than these.
Men live and die by their dreams, but long after they've been abandoned, they still smolder deep in men's hearts.